Hey watch friends, today we're going to be checking out the latest offering from the Singaporean microbrand Feynman. They call this one the V, but you can also call it the 6. Either one is fitting considering the fact that this is their 6th model in the lineup. While we're going to be looking at a prototype today, this one is already actually shipping, and I'll of course have a link to their website down in the video description if you care to check anything out further. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and just dive straight into this. We'll knock out the basic specs, get a sense for what this is like to live with, do some comps, all that kind of good stuff. This comes standard with a 2-year warranty. The case in this is a TV style case, so I went ahead and took several measurements to give a better sense for it. Measured from roughly the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position, this is coming in at 37.8 millimeters. From the 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock position, you're looking at 40.7 millimeters, and this is a lugless style, as you can see there. As far as the bezel, it does step down pretty significantly, and you're looking at 32.5 millimeters. Despite the fact that this looks like an integrated bracelet watch, this actually is changeable, so it does have hidden lugs underneath, and the bracelet is coming in at 24 millimeters. So not the most common size, but certainly not an oddball either, and you can definitely find straps should you choose to change it out. As far as the thickness, this is inclusive of the sapphire crystal, which is a flat sapphire crystal, coming in at 8.7 millimeters. Extremely thin presence to this overall, and again, we'll look at some comps so you can get a better sense for that. As already mentioned, flat sapphire crystal, which does feature an inner AR coating as well. The movement in this, they did not skimp here. This is coming with an ETA 7001, very venerable movement, excellent, and it's actually the top grade of that. So what do you get for that for those who aren't familiar? It is going to be a hand wind movement. It is lower beat, however, with a small second, it won't really make a difference. It does not have hacking for that, so that is something important to note, but they're great, excellent workhorse movements, a lot of history behind those. You're looking at a 42-hour power reserve, and this one, with being the top grade, actually comes with 5 position regulation as well, so you should have great tracking for that also. As far as the water resistance, despite the dressy style, this still comes with a reasonable 50 meters or 5 atmospheres of water resistance. But what about the weight? On this size to my 6.5-inch wrist on this bracelet, which is the first bracelet they've ever offered, this is only coming in at 111.4 grams. So very light presence to this. So with the thin package and a light presence, as you can imagine, this one wears very small and comfortably on the wrist, but we'll check that out. So let's go ahead and dive deeper, and first check out the colors. This is available in 3 variants. There's what they refer to as the blue that we're looking at today, and we'll unpack that. There's also a Founders Edition, which is the green, and that's a signature from their past models as well. And then there's additionally a silver version. What you're going to notice on these is that they chose like a scratched or what I would call a vertical brushing for the dial. So you'll find that it's fairly dynamic. What's pretty cool is despite the fact that the brushing is fairly pronounced, depending on the way light is hitting it, it can look like a solid dial. And in the case of this one, it actually can shift to an almost black color or a very, very deep navy coloration. But then as that light hits it and you start to pick up some of those lines, it actually reminds me of kind of like a distressed blue jean. It just has that well-worn look to it. It gets that kind of gradation in color. It's reminiscent to me of a Tusino, their Shellback, that blue variant that we've looked at in the past. At least we looked at the enamel version, but we saw pictures of that one as well. And it's just a really cool effect. I do like that. So it adds a very dynamic nature. So it's still understated, but it gives that kind of visual pop to it as well. As far as the dial layout, it's a very clean layout. As you can see, they didn't go with a logo or really anything else on the dial, which I think is a good call, not only for the dressy styling, but the fact that you've got that sub dial, which does add a lot of presence to the dial overall. We'll see though here momentarily, and actually let's go ahead and shift over to that. The rehot here on the outside, you can see this has a nice steeped traditional slope style for a TV case, but it does have down at the 6 o'clock position their brand name very subtly tucked down there. Around the rest of it, you're going to see that this does have hashes all the way around, so you still have that precision legibility. The 5-minute increments have nice broad lines and then more narrow hashes in between, so no problems there in that regard, but we'll come back to legibility. As far as the hardware, this is going to be reminiscent of what we saw on the Eclipse version 2. Specifically, you're looking at it's a skeletonized Aero style, and it is polished for the handset. It's a very good looking handset to my eye, though as I'm sure you've already picked up on and we'll come back to, it does have some legibility pieces with it, which is common with the skeletonized handset. Once again, you can see that they chose to go with a very nice polished pinion cap on this, which just really completes the design there for the hour and minute hand. As far as the second hand, they went with their signature styling. So this has been a staple for the brand, where they did that kind of lizard tail effect for that. I know it's going to be polarizing for many, but I do appreciate that that is a staple for the brand. And then as far as the markers, you can see there isn't a lume applied to this, but they went with a nice fanciful numerals all the way around. So you can see the Arabic numerals going around, and you can see everywhere with the exception of the 6 o'clock for that subdial, so they had to make room for that. But otherwise, it has a nice look to it. I think it fits the dressy styling, and I'm happy with that font. As far as the bezel, as already looked at, this is a fixed bezel construction. It is set back pretty significantly. It does have compound cut, so you can see it goes straight up and then cuts over. It's nicely incorporated in there, and it does have full polish all the way around, which I think gives just that little bit of pop to really kind of walk the line and balance between the somewhat sporty and the dress styling that we'll look at further. As far as the case here, you can see it is flat in profile. However, don't let that scare you off, because as you can see, it has a very tucked case back. So it pretty much does sit, even on my 6.5-inch wrist. The case is so short at only just under 41 millimeters that it really does sit nice and flat across the wrist as well. So I haven't found that to be a detractor like it sometimes can be. One of the things you're really going to notice, though, and we already talked about earlier, is this is supremely thin. The mid case, the bezel, the case back especially, everything is just really thin for a very thin overall package as well. As far as this octagonal shape, you can see that they did blend the lines here. So while you have just a straight cut down at the bottom, though it's not sharp edge, they went with chamfer cut all the way around, which I really think that adds to visual appeal, and of course, as you can see here, light play as well. It is going to be brushed all the way around, which is part of the reason why I think the polished bezel was a good choice. That just gives a nice contrast and pop there, and it keeps it from going too dressy, in my opinion. Looking at the silhouette, you can see very nice shape to that with the octagonal, and then having those chamfer cuts going through there, just flat or straight across the lugs, because again, it is a hidden or tucked lug design. And then on the 3 o'clock side, you can see that there is no crown guard, again with a dressy style. I think that's fitting. As far as the crown itself, this is coming in at 6.3 millimeters. As you'd expect for being a manual wind watch, this is going to be a push-pull construction. As far as the finishing, this is what I would call a partial coin edge. You can see it does have a traditional coin edge, and then it has breaks and wide bars in between. No problems whatsoever with grip. Actually, we'll touch upon that again in a moment here, but I think that's nicely incorporated and well proportioned to the overall case. You can see this does have a stepped design for it on the outside, which that just adds a nice little visual touch. It doesn't really have any functional impact, positive or negative, but that is cool with having that step and then that chamfer out to the edge. And then on the edge itself, you can see that they have the Feynman F that's nicely milled down in there, and it has a nice kind of etching to that. As far as the actual winding, let's go and see. You probably can't even really hear anything. Very, very quiet click to this. This is one of the smoothest crowns, whether you're winding it or setting the hands. It is actually so smooth that the only thing I can think of that is smoother is a quartz movement, but it is so smooth that you can't even really tell when you're manipulating. Let's go ahead and actually change that. I mean, it is just insanely smooth as to how cleanly that glides. So this, of course, is not only, as I mentioned, a prototype, but it's a sample of one. However, with this particular one, it is incredible how smooth that is. I can't imagine anything being smoother. In fact, if it were, it'd probably be a little too easy to manipulate. Shifting over to the case back on this is held in with screws. So it has 4 screws on the outer corners, with being this kind of squarish or octagonal shape for that as well. The finishing is going to be full brush, and it carries over and mates nicely with the dial, where you have vertical brushing for that. In the middle, you're going to notice that this does have like a porthole style exhibition window, which that exhibition window shows that nicely decorated, again, with being the top grade. You can see the 7001. I really think they class it up. Not only, of course, the Geneva striping, but you've got the blued accents and all those kind of pieces. So I think it's a good looking case back overall. Understated, but still has some visual appeal and pop to it. As far as the bracelet, as already mentioned, this does have a changeable bracelet, even though it has the integrated style. You're looking at 24 millimeters at the lugs, and it does have an aggressive taper down to 16 millimeters at the clasp. As we already talked about, the flat case on this wears perfectly fine on my wrist, no problems with hangover or drop, but we'll come back to that as far as the wear characteristics. The bracelet styling is very unique. It is what I would describe as being kind of like a C and I incorporation. On the exterior, you can see C, whether you're looking right direction or the kind of mirror image of that. And then in the middle, to bridge those, they have eyes to connect that. The finish in keeping with the case itself, is a full brush, so again, it keeps it from going too over the top with the dressy styling. As far as the retention, this is held in with pins and collars. I haven't had any problems in sizing this. I know some people lament the pins and collars. However, I will say, once you get them sized, you really never have to worry about them backing out like you do screws. And if you need a toolkit, I'll have one link down the video description. Very easy to do, so I wouldn't be too daunted by that. On the back, you do have quick release spring bars, so if you choose to throw on a 24mm strap, you do have options available there. And then as far as the articulation, this one, with having the styling that it does not have a lot of articulation. I think it is sufficient for overall wrist comfort, but you'll especially notice at the lugs, it really does not have much drop to it at all. So it, in many regards, wears like a pretty pronounced male end link would, but because the case is so short and because it's a tucked lug design, I haven't found that to be any problems even on my 6.5-inch wrist. So no real complaints there, just something to be aware of. It does almost wear like a fixed bracelet kind of design, and I don't mean integrated. I mean as far as the like hard or solid link kind of bracelet there. As far as the clasp, this is a traditional butterfly clasp for it. It does, as you open it up, have a milled bridge on the inside. Do notice that this is going to be a directional clasp, so when you fold that over, you do have to get the links in the right order because they have that eye to just kind of complete that look, so you don't have that typical gap that you would for a butterfly clasp. So that's pretty cool. Additionally, do note that while the one that we're looking at today does not have half links, the production does include half links. So that should help everyone to get this pretty well sized to their wrist. I know many people are iffy about butterfly clasp for that reason, but having half links does definitely help out. Alright, so that should give you a better feel for this particular model, but let's go ahead and bring in some comps to get an even better idea. First, let's go ahead and bring in another Feynman. This is their Fjord, just to give an idea of the style. And again, in particular, you're going to notice obviously very different style watches, but check out as far as that second hand, you can see that lizard tail, which carries over for all of their models. And then next up, here it is next to one of my absolute favorites. This is the Dorenzo. This is the DRZ02R Aerolite in the blue color. That gives an idea there as far as kind of sizing and overall presence. As you can see, the Dorenzo definitely has more presence to my eye. And then here it is. Let's bring in another kind of TV type. This is the Trafford Crossroads. This is their original series that we've checked out previously. Gives an idea there as far as sizing. You can see definitely the Crossroads does have more presence as well with the 40mm, which does kind of wear a bit on the large size for a 40, especially considering the fact this one has lugs versus the lugless design. And then finally, want to bring it in next to another ETA 7001 watch. This is another really thin one. This is the Zelos Nova, and this is the original Nova. But check out there as far as the thinness. You can see that they do compare nicely. They proportion things a little bit differently. You can see, the sapphire crystal there, which does add to total thickness, but then the mid case I think is a little more visually slim. And then of course the downturns versus the flat. But you can see both very, very slim watches, and of course with being the same movement, a similar layout as far as with the subdial. So that should give you a better idea for this particular model, as well as how it stacks up to some others that you might know. But where does that leave us? So for me personally, as far as the positives, I've got to say, this thing, it absolutely, in the dressy-ish styling, completely disappears under the cuff just like you would want. It's super thin, it's very light overall as well. So this is one that until you want to slide it out from under your cuff and get a good look at that dial, it's one that you can easily forget that you're wearing. The styling, to me, is pretty timeless. Despite the fact that this has its own unique style for the Feynman design language, particularly like with the second hand, I think that this keeps a really traditional dress watch look for it, so it's one that I think will age well. The movement, as I already talked about earlier, the 7001 is just a fantastic movement, no complaints there, especially in a dress watch. Really happy with that. And then this, I think, is going to fit well on virtually all wrists. We've seen it on my 6.5-inch wrist, and as you can see, I've got plenty of wiggle room there because of the nature of the end links. Certainly, I think that does limit how small it can go, but it does still have plenty of presence for larger wrists as well, especially considering the dressy styling. In between here, as far as the neutral, the price. This is one that I think it is fairly priced, coming in right now, converted to US dollars at $1,286, $1,286 at time of recording. However, while that is definitely not the cheapest, For considering that you're getting a top grade 7001, all those kind of things, and this is actually now the fully launched, this isn't the pre-order pricing for that, I think it's respectable for what it is. However, I do also understand that that's really pushing it for many people as far as what you're willing to consider for budget. What about the critiques though? We already talked about the articulation. That's something you definitely need to be aware of. That is going to be limiting, especially if your wrist is a good bit smaller than mine. That's the biggest problem that I would foresee there, is because this doesn't have much drop to the end. I could see that being more of an issue than the watch itself, but you could always put it on a strap as well if you prefer. As far as the legibility, as I already talked about earlier, these hands, and as I'm sure you've seen throughout this video and throughout this footage, these hands do have a tendency to disappear depending on the lighting as they pick up black or reflection there. With having the darker dial, as that dial darkens up, the hands can really just disappear as well. When they get that pop though with the light hitting them, they really do have that punchy contrast against the dial, and in that regard, I really like them. So for me, no functional issues, but absolutely something to be aware of. And then, as is the case with every Feynman, the second hand, that tail type design, that's going to turn a lot of people off. I really appreciate the fact that they have established their design language. I appreciate that is significant for the brand. However, I do know that that's going to turn a lot of people off, as it always does with these. So that's always a polarizing piece, and I do want to make sure to mention it. So where does that leave us? As I've already kind of touched upon, this to me has that classic dress watch style that you'd want. It's not too in your face, and I think it's pretty versatile in that regard. But because they made choices like they did with the brushing and just the delicate application of polish, I think this is a pretty versatile watch for casual wear as well. So if you like this particular style, if the price point doesn't scare you away, it's definitely one that I think is worth taking a look at. So I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy it, as always, tap that like button. If you haven't already done so, smash that subscribe button and drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you like the model style? Which of the three colors is your favorite? Is there another one that's similar to this that you prefer over it? All that kind of good stuff. Thanks for watching.